Hey everybody, welcome back to what, as if there was any doubt, it is now a series of the quest for the Brown sound. We are going to whiz right past Women and Children first, and I'm going right to Fair Warning. Fair Warning was kind of like the departure from the first three albums. It was darker, moodier. The songs they seemed to be more complex. There might have been more overdubs. There's just a lot more. It's a lot richer, fuller. It's darker lyrically too, I guess, when you think about it. So the whole album has got that vibe. As far as what is different, what's going to be different in this video, I'm going to show you everything that I always show you: the guitars, the amp, the speaker cabinet, the signal chain, pedal board, etc. I'm going to open the amp up actually this time for you, and I'm going to show you the actual plate voltage that we're running at and where the bias is set at that plate voltage. There's also a speaker cabinet change for this one. Now, this was documented. There was a Rudy Lirin interview. He was Ed's guitar tech through this time. They ended up with the Celestion G1275 instead of a greenback. Fair Warning has got a lot of different guitar tunings. And I'm not talking about it being the low E being tuned down to D. Like half the album is like the low E is tuned down to D. But within those tunings, he's all over the map. Like for instance, Unchained, it averages like 30 cents flat of E flat. So it's below E flat. Push Comes to Shove is a half step high. It's tuned to F. It's all over the map, and a lot of it is essential to getting the tone, because the guitar has a different timbre at different pitches, different tensions and everything. To get accurate, to get really super close, you have to tune the way it's tuned, period. Alan Garber is like a Van Halen aficionado. He's a nerd like all of us. A lot of you might know him from the Metro Amp forum. He does the tuning offsets. He does amazing transcriptions of the Van Halen stuff too. He's a technical expert when it comes to the playing part of the Van Halen stuff, and he's been a great resource. Really, and I've loved getting to know him through doing these things. So check out his stuff too. You know him as Garbage. It's Garbage on a lot of the forums and on the old Metro Amp forum. That's where you find. That's where you would have found him way back in the day. But he's still out there. I think I saw him posting on VH Links. But he's done this great tuning video. It's tuning offsets with a Peterson strobe tuner. So anyway, enough of me rambling. Let's get into this thing and see what comes up. Welcome back. All right, here's my Frankie tribute. It's not really a tribute. I just did it because I was in a Van Halen cover band and we played some shows and we were doing Fair Warning. So anyway, so it's not super accurate. My paint job sucks. I did it all. But anyway, Music Craft, Northern Ash body. It's their Frank body. You can see it's got the same chisel route thing going on with it. It's a Music Craft neck also. It's their Frankie neck. It's maple cap fingerboard, really nice neck. 10-inch radius on it. Well, I think all my stuff is 10-inch radius. That's what I prefer because I'm an old timer. I grew up with no compound radiuses. But anyway, Floyd Rose tremolo. As far as what's really interesting about this guitar is this pickup. Now, I alluded to in the Van Halen 2 video I alluded to the rewind that Seymour did for Ed on his 61 PAF out of the ES335, which I think the PAF was stock on the first album, and then somewhere after the first album, Seymour did the rewind for him. And when Seymour was rewinding these, while he was still, my understanding, while he was still with Mighty Mite doing pickup winding for Mighty Mite. So this was something he was doing on the side and trying to get his business going. But what he was offering to the celebrities, he would approach celebrities and say, hey, let me rewind your pickup. I can get you this really great sounding pickup. Everybody's using them. So-and-so's using this, so-and-so's using that. So I had the privilege, I was lucky to find a couple of examples of it. And I've kind of known about this for a while, but I've never been able to necessarily prove it. But I've seen some documentation online, and like I said, I've seen a couple of live examples, and we put a meter on them. And the amazing thing is, these original JBs, this was the prototype JB, probably wound in the mid to late 70s. Before they were available, you couldn't go to a music store or a guitar, a luthier or whatever, and buy a JB pickup back then. There was no Seymour Duncan pickups yet. So this was the first attempt at it. So what this is, I had Greg from Jalen Guitar wind me this pickup, custom wind, with a very specific spec, which if there's enough interest, I'll tell you what the spec is. But essentially it's a offset asymmetric coils. You've got the screw coil is wound hotter than the slug coil, and it's got a rough cast Alnico 5 short Alnico 5 magnet. So this thing behaves truly like a hot rodded PAF. It's got like a full woody tone. It's not overly compressed like an overwound pickup, even though it comes in. God, I think it's about 15K. I think this thing is wound to 14.5, 15K. I don't remember. I got to pull a spec. But the thing is, it's not about the total wind. It's about how the coils are wound. So the screw coil is the hotter one of the two, and it's a fairly large offset. It's like 16.5% difference in wind. So that's huge. And the pickup behaves. I love how it behaves. I mean, Ed used to play with the volume knob a lot, just a little subtle changes. And this pickup keeps its brightness in the first couple of clicks down. The first, all it does is take a little bit of drive out of the pickup. So you get a little cleaner, just less fizz on the top end kind of thing than you do when it's wide open. And he plays a couple of songs that way. Like the verse parts on the main riff on Hear About It Later, he's playing it with the volume backed off. Center Swing is the volume backed down. But he's backed down even further because it gets a little darker sounding. And that's when I play the clips on this video, that's what you'll hear is I've got the volume backed down a little bit. All right, another thing why I said I should probably go back and redo the first two videos if I were an ambitious guy, which I don't think I'm going to go back and do them. But huge thing here, and again, speculation, theory, whatever. I've got a 250K pot in here, and I think that there was a 250K pot in the original black and white striped one, and I think there's still a 250K pot in the Frankenstein with this pickup. The reason for that is a Fender Stratocaster comes stock with 250K pots. Volume and the two tone knobs are all 250K because they work nicer with the single coils. They take some of the edge off. Ed, self-admittedly in the beginning, was not a very good wiring guy. He didn't understand. He couldn't figure out the circuitry, and he had all the crap from that original. I think it was the Sunburst Strat was his first one that he took the chisel to and hacked it up and put the humbucker in it. You know, it wasn't like it is today where you go to your local music store and say, hey, give me a 500K pot, or you order it online and say, I want a 500K pot for my humbucker. You know, and actually Les Pauls, I think, during that era were coming with 300K pots. I mean they kind of varied all over the map, but neither here nor there. So my speculation is that he wasn't very good at wiring. Who would have known? He wouldn't have known that while the standard practice is to put a 500K pot with a humbucker, 250K pot with a single coil. I'm sure as far as he knew, it's just a volume knob. It's a volume knob on the guitar. I'm just going to wire it to this other pickup I'm putting in. And what it does is the 250K pot changes the resonant hump, the resonant frequency of the pickup just ever so slightly. It lowers it a little bit. It gives you a little bit more of a lower mid kind of push, and takes a little bit of the fizz out of the top. And now that I've done it, I've theorized this for a long time. I just never did it because I thought, you can't break the rules. You know, it's 500K for a humbucker. But I've thought about it for a long time, and sure enough, I should have followed my hunch, because I'm relatively sure that that's what it's supposed to be too, or that's what it was in his guitars. So for the black and white striped, and then this was still the black and white striped, so 250K. What happened in the later guitars when, you know, you start working with Kramer and more people start getting involved in everything, who knows? But for now, for this one, for fair warning, let's face it, it's 1980, 1981. We're only looking at 2 years, probably 2 years since the pickup got rewound, because it wasn't rewound for the first album in late 77 when they recorded that. So there it is. That's my theory. You'll hear a lot of this. I think most of the album was recorded with this guitar. So here we go. Just a quick note on this one too. I don't think I've mentioned it anywhere else in all my ramblings. On this video, for fair warning, we've got every knob except for volume 2 on 10. With the first two videos, we didn't get all the way up to 10 because it gets too hairy, but fair warning is very hairy sounding. So top left input, everything on 10. Hey, just a really quick disclaimer about the guitar parts that I'm going to be playing on this video. I'm going to try to do them as accurately as possible. That's kind of not my intention here. This isn't a Van Halen clinic or a how-to. This is just, I'm kind of winging it, trying to go in for the feel and a general structure. I'm going to play the song really close. But for those that are saying, oh, hey, he didn't play that right, that's because I haven't sat down and learned it. So I just want to get that out in front. And especially on this album, like Dirty Movies, you know, the slide part and all that stuff, I'm not going to play the slide part. I'm going to play you the notes in the slide part. I'm going to play it like Ed played it live. And then there's also some conglomeration of parts that was also done. So I kind of searched out what Ed did live on some of these songs, because I actually played this in a Van Halen tribute song. We did the Fair Warning album. So I had to go and learn a lot of these things in sort of a conglomerate, what works with the band, one guitar player way. So that's the way I'm playing them here today. So I'm sorry if I'm not playing them note for note exact to where they are, but it's in the spirit of, and it should be, I mean, for the most part, pretty close. There's guys that are going to say, hey, you're not playing that right. But that's okay. I'm not worried about that. That's not what I'm here. We're here to do the tone. So, again, quick disclaimer. Thanks for listening. Okay, I have got the amplifier opened up here on the bench. This is the orange Tolex 68 Super Lead clone build that I've been doing the other videos with, the Brown Sound videos. Here comes the disclaimer, the warning. Be extremely careful in these things. The voltages are ungodly high and lethal and can kill you with relative ease. So if you have no idea what you're doing, stay out of the amp. Alright, so right now I've got the amp running at 120 volts. It's not running, it's just on standby. So I just want to show you the voltages. I got the voltmeter right here. Ground wire is over here in the lug here, so I never like to have two hands in the amp if I can avoid it. So here on the power switch, it's showing, the meter is showing 120 volts AC. Okay? At 120 volts, the heater voltage in this amp is 6.27. I mean, the spec is 6.3 volts, so we're essentially there. We're right where we're supposed to be for the heater voltage. All right, so when I turn the high tension on, when I turn the standby on, I'm going to switch this to DC voltage, and we're going to measure the B plus. I'm not going to start digging around and show you individual plate voltages and everything like that. The plate voltage is going to be really close to what the B plus voltage is through the amp, and the B plus voltage is what comes out of the transformer that feeds the amplifier. So the meter is set to DC volts. I'm going to stick the ground wire, and this is where the voltages get lethal, and you'll see that momentarily. I'm going to put this is where the B plus, it's easy access to it. You can stick your lead in. I've got no hands in the amplifier. I've got a speaker load connected. You have to do that. Okay. So now we turn it on and see our B plus voltage in this amp. And I've told you this thing's got this, in previous videos I've told you this amp's got a different, it's got one of those like pre-variac transformers. So A standard 68 super lead would probably be running somewhere around 450 to 470 volts DC at this point in the amplifier. Okay, so we can also at this point, I have the bias probe plugged in so you can see what bias we're running. Only on one tube, so you know it's not really accurate, but it'll tell you, it'll give you a general idea of where the amp is set for bias at full voltage. So as the amp warms up, it hasn't been on that long, but as the amp warms up, this will probably come up to about 38, 39 volts. And if you take a look at like the Weber tube amp dissipation chart for setting voltages, for setting your bias voltage, at 400 volts DC plate voltage, which is essentially here at the B+, to have an average 65% dissipation, which would be just an average, not a hot bias and not a cold bias, just right in the middle, would be about 38 volts. And that's where this amp is set. So at normal wall voltage, this amp is running at the bias is set at 38 milliamps. The bias probe converts it to DC millivolts. But that's neither here nor there. That's just a function of the bias probe. What you're looking at here is a conversion to milliamps. So see, as the amp is warming up now, it's going to get higher. And this amp, I keep it set, the way I set the bias is at 120 volts. And then I set the bias at, it's not hot, it's not cold, it's just a standard bias, so I'm right around 38. If I err towards a little bit hotter. See, it's coming up in temperature. But now let's watch what happens when I'm going to disconnect this for a second. I'm going to turn the variac down. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to set this back to AC volts. I'm going to shut the standby off. All right, so we're at 119.8. I'm going to turn the variac down to where I'm running this amplifier, which is, believe it or not, right around 68 volts. Yeah, there it is. So now the variac's been turned down to 68 volts. And you know, if you ever watch those Sunset Sound videos where they're talking about the recording of some of the Van Halen albums, I think it was the one that had Doug Messenger in it. And he relates a story about when he went into the studio, went into Sunset Sound while Van Halen was recording Fair Warning. And he commented to Ed about, Ed showed him the amplifier, and Doug Messenger said, yeah, I got one just like that, but yours is a lot quieter than mine. Well, that one way to do it is to run the amp super low with the variac. So it also affects tone. The amp gets super spongy and everything, and there's cool things that come with it. But anyway, so as you can see, the AC voltage here measured on the power switch is at 68 volts AC. So now, with the variac turned down, the heater voltage is at 3.48, which is getting pretty low by tube standards, and people will say you'll suffer from cathode stripping and everything because you're running the tubes too cold. I've been doing this for years. I've never experienced that. My tube life is I think, pretty standard. I run the amps full up most of the time, so they're working hard, and I think you burn tubes out faster just running the amp turned up to 10 all the time. So I guess I haven't worried about it. And this whole doing the Van Halen thing, and if you're trying to cop what he's doing, he was experimenting constantly, so who knows where he really ran it. But you'll hear in the video I'm running it, it's running at that 68 volts, so you'll hear what it sounds like between 66 and 68. I think my variac is a little bit off on its dial and everything, but all right, so now let's check out, we'll switch to DC volts, and we'll get these things properly situated, the test leads, and let me turn the standby on, and now we'll see where that B plus comes in. we're at 233 volts. We were at 120 volts AC. We were at 404 or whatever it was, 405 volts. Now we're running at 234 volts with the variac turned so far down. So you start to get really spongy. The amp gets quiet and manageable. I mean, at this point, you could play in a club with it and probably not have the owners of the club screaming at you. So let's take a look at where the bias falls in now at this point. Now we haven't made any changes to the bias circuit, and we aren't going to. I know the story is that you crank the bias and all that stuff when the amp is turned to 90 volts and all that stuff. So there's my bias now. I'm running at 4.7 milliamps. I know everybody is thinking, oh, that's just wrong, but you'll hear it. It sounds, I'm getting about as close as I think I can get to the fair warning tone, and I'm doing it with this setup. So I just wanted to show you all that. That's the ins and outs of this thing. So I hope that explains a lot of things about the guts of this amp and how I'm running it.
Alright guys, this is the pedal board. It's the same one that I've used in the previous videos. It's super simple. In fact, this time we took the Echoplex out of the chain, so the old EP3 is no longer in the signal chain. It's a lot of guitar cable. It's a 30-footer going into the MXR flanger. Then coming out of the phase shifter, it's another 30-footer. So you got it's 60 feet of guitar cable. The foot switch there, just the simple foot switches for the Echoplex. So that's not coming into it. So anyway, that's it. That's as difficult as the signal chain gets, or as complex as the signal chain gets. All right, here's the new setup. The late 70s slant Marshall 4x12, originally loaded with the blackbacks. There's on the left-hand side, I still got well, I should say, on this side, I've got the original blackbacks, and then on the other side, on the right-hand side here, I loaded those two with the G1275T. So you can see I'm only miking the Celestion G1275s, and the microphone SM57, but the microphone this time there's no breathing room. It is right up on the grill cloth, and I've got that mic placed obviously on axis, but it is right where the dust cap of the speaker meets the cone, so it's like bisecting that seam. That's where the mic is pointed. So there you have it. That's the change for the speaker cabinet this time around. Plus, we're out of the makeshift ISO booth I'm usually in. We're in the room of the actual studio. Okay, here we are in Logic Pro now. So I'm still using the same Behringer X32 as the USB interface where all the mics come in and everything. For this one, I am only using one microphone, which I showed in the speaker cabinet little quick video we did. We're micing up the G1275. If this looks familiar, it's because it's the same setup I use for the 2-mic rig for Van Halen 1 and Van Halen 2. So yes, here's the greenback. It's muted. Everything else is completely. It's the same thing. There's just slightly different settings in the EQ and maybe the harmonizer and the reverb. So the NLS nonlinear summer Waves makes it. It's a cool thing. This is mimicking an SSL. And I use that because it's the closest thing to like an API preamp. So this is my substitute for having an outboard or a real API preamp. Then I use an API EQ of 550A, but as you can see, I'm not using it to EQ. I'm just passing analog signal through it just to get more of an analog feel. And then also on the mic channel, on the 57 mic channel, I'm using, where'd it go? An 1176, and we're not hitting it hard. I mean, it's maybe 2 or 3 dB compression. Doing the Dr. Pepper setting 10, 2, and 4. Here, I'll show you how hard we're hitting it. Here's the. See, it's not that much. So then, all of this gets bussed over to the studio microphone or studio room, and this is kind of a feature in this is a feature in the Sunset Sound reverb package. So I'll play that for you. So it's getting blended into the sound. So it's mimicking a microphone in the room in Studio 2 at Sunset Sound. So let me just solo that. So you see when I mute it, it's you can tell, but it's subtle. Okay, so that's kind of a nice little added flavor to getting more live kind of in the room kind of sound. So I like using that trick. Because the guitar would have been picked up by open drum mics and every other mic that was in the main room. So that's an emulation of the main room, courtesy of the Sunset Sound Reverb app from IK Multimedia. All right, so this channel then gets bussed over to its output goes to bus 4, which is I still got it labeled as 2 guitar tracks, but this is where the guitar I guess gets processed the most. So I've got another one of those nonlinear summers here at the top, but just to pass through all at line level, again, just the analog thing. And then we run into, where did it go? This is the EQ. This is the EQ I'm using for the all the main guitar parts here on Fair Warning. It's nothing radical. It's the Pultec again. It's the same EQ that we've used for the first 2, but the EQ settings are slightly different. If anything, they're not as pronounced as they were on the first 2 albums. It's more of a middle of the road type of EQ. So you can get a good look at that. And then this is where we start using the auxiliaries or auxiliary buses for the reverb and the harmonizer. So this bus 1 comes out to the reverb, and also I'll pull over this IK Multimedia Sunset Sound reverb. Using the pre-delay is set at 100 milliseconds. We're rolling off the low end at 129 hertz, 130 hertz, and the top end is cutting out at 7K. So it's a darker reverb. We're using the echo plate reverb. We're not using the EMT. We're using the echo plate, and we're not using one of the famous chambers from Sunset Sound. So this is, I did my best to try to copy and just emulate what the reverb sounded like on that original recording. So I can play it. Let me just solo the reverb for you. And as you can see, the reverb is straight up. It's in the stereo. It's not panned hard left, hard right. What's panned hard left, fairly hard, almost completely hard left, is the actual guitar, the dry guitar. So that's pushed over to the left side, along with, and here's the harmonizer. So we're bussing this over to the harmonizer. And this is the H910. And it's a pretty simple, I mean, it's the smallest pitch shift down I can do. It's not a micro pitch, because I don't think this one can do micro pitch. That they got to go to the 949, which was their next one. So this is the famous 910. This is like the first one that kind of did it, and it's famous for its pitch glitches, and that glitch creates kind of a cool sound. But we're using a little bit of feedback just to give it a little bit of chorus type swirl. But I can't solo that one for you, because if I do, you won't hear any difference, because it needs something to pitch shift against. But we can mute it, so let's do that. Again, it's very subtle. So on the main output side, I am running an LA2A. Where'd that go? It's up here. So this is compressing everything on the output side. So you can, I'll show you how hard we're hitting that. Again, not much. And then I'm using some tape emulation. It's a Studer. It's a 15 IPS Studer. I just picked it because I liked the way it sounded, and it was a famous deck. I don't know what decks they actually had at Sunset, but anyway, this is what it sounds like. It kind of acts as a nice glue, and it takes some of the top end off. It's just a little bit of compression. I really like it. I use it on just about everything, because it just helps for that whole analog feel, and I think it's really important. All right, for the Hear About It Later intro, it's very similar to the Women in Love intro. I'm running a Stratocaster, just a stock Stratocaster, into the flanger, the MXR flanger, and then that's running into a DI, which goes into the X32 mixer, which then feeds Logic, and we're just running one channel. There's no fancy double tracking or anything. Harmonizer, it's a 949. I'm sorry, no, it's a 910. I use a 910 on this. Stack 910, so we're harmonizing above and below the pitch with a little bit of feedback on both, just for a little bit of a more chorusy swirl. But most of what you're hearing is the flanger. So I mean, that's the predominant sound, and it's obviously there's reverb on here, but it's very simple. So here it is.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. We've done another one. Another one's in the can. It's fair warning is quite a thing. I mean, there's a lot of comped guitar parts. There's a lot of stuff going on this album. Tough one to tackle. I I didn't get to cover everything that I wanted to cover. The video, I ramble too much, and the video gets too long, and there's a lot of things I want to cover and show you, and I just can't get to all of them. I mean, I didn't get to. So This Is Love. I understand. The rumor is that was his 335 that he played the solo, at least the solo on that. I think the rest of the song was probably the Frankenstein. And then you've got One Foot Out the Door, which is just it's more of the mini synth, and then you've got that guitar solo that is the subject of internet mystery of how it's played and everything. So, I mean, that needs to be tackled, but that's, at this point beyond my pay grade. And then there's Push Comes to Shove, which is another cool one with an epic lead that I wanted to put on here too. But, we're trying to get to the tone, so it's not about necessarily playing, but anyway, I think we demonstrated a lot of cool things and how to get there. If you have comments, questions, whatever, reach out to me. You know how to get me. I respond to just about everything. I think almost everything on YouTube in the comments and everything. Like I said, hope you enjoyed it. Let's see if we do another one of these. I don't know. We'll see. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. See ya.